Good evening, everyone. Thank you so much for coming. My name is Hannah, and I'm with Councilmember Mike Bonin's office. We're going to start the program in about 1 to 2 minutes, so if you could please take your seats and quiet down. The council member is going to be on stage, and then the panel will begin. So appreciate you taking your seats and quieting down. Thank you so much.
Good evening, everybody. Good evening, everybody. Thank you for being here tonight. This is the first of 2 town halls we are doing. One tonight on solutions to homelessness, and one exactly 1 week from tonight, same time, same location, with LAPD and city and county prosecutors on public safety, crime, and on neighborhood policing. So I want to welcome you here tonight. I want to thank you for being here. I'll explain just a note about our format. I'm going to start out with sort of a brief framing presentation, and then I will introduce a panel of folks from the city, from the county, from LAPD, from service agencies, and some people with lived experience homeless to answer questions for you. After I do the initial presentation, former CNN anchor Carol Costello will moderate, with questions that have been submitted from you, a panel discussion for about 45 minutes, after which we will then do questions directly from the floor. So again, thank you for being here. We're going to start with a bit of a PowerPoint. As you know, the topic tonight is homelessness in Los Angeles, which I don't need to tell anybody. There is not a person in this room, there is not a person in this zip code, there's not a person in Los Angeles who does not know that this is the crisis of our times. And we see it everywhere we go. Under the 405, at the farmer's market, near the post office, on Venice Boulevard, by the wetlands. We see RVs and campers on our streets. People have discovered needles on sidewalks, and we have become a city of encampments. It is absolutely unacceptable. This is a condition that no one wants to see continue. And tonight we are going to talk with people who are involved on the ground and in the budgeting about some of the things that are being done to try to change that. But what we have here is not just a situation of tents and trailers and syringes and encampments. We also have a situation of people. People who are living, people who are dying, people who are suffering trauma on our streets. In the county, there are more than 58,000 of them. In the city, some 31,000. And last year, 921 of them died on our streets. This year, that number is probably going to top 1,000. And we just lost a young soul near the post office in Mar Vista just a couple weeks ago. So how do we, together, the city, the county, government, philanthropy, neighborhood councils, neighborhoods, solve this problem? In order to have a serious discussion about that, there's a couple different things that we need to sort of lay a foundation on. One, we need to understand that there is no magic bullet, there is no silver bullet, there's no magic wand to make this problem go away. It's going to take a collective effort by a lot of people, a lot of levels of government, and a lot of different resources with multiple strategies. So to start this, I just want to very briefly go over who's homeless in Los Angeles, what causes homelessness, what ends homelessness, and who in the continuum of government and services does what, and then a little bit about the pace of what's going on here. So first of all, who is homeless in Los Angeles? We see people, visible people who are homeless on the streets and encampments at street corners and all the time. We also do not see many people who are invisible homeless, people who may be riding a bus with a child, or someone who may be sitting next to you at McDonald's or at the doctor's office. There are people who are homeless who are also invisible people to us. Among the homeless here in Los Angeles, almost 10% are under the age of 18. 1/3 of the homeless here in Los Angeles are female. About 15% are families. We will have a discussion, I'm sure, tonight about what percentage of the population suffers from mental illness or drug addiction. We know that 16% or so suffer from an actual physical disability of some sort. And we know that here on the west side, the population tends to be younger. We have a larger younger population than in other parts of town. Hollywood also has a younger population. It's also worth noting that in Los Angeles, as in many other places, there is a disproportionately large percentage of our homeless population which is black. There is a disproportionately large one, and it is an enormous problem that requires specific solutions. So among the population here, the most visible population is single men, the largest population here in Los Angeles. But also, as I said, we have families that have been fleeing domestic violence. 40% of the people who are on our streets have had, at some point in their life, an experience with domestic violence. And I believe about 1/3 of the women who are on the streets in Los Angeles are homeless coming directly from an experience with domestic violence. Children aging out of the foster care system without a permanent placement, without being adopted or finding a permanent home, have a 40 to 50% chance of becoming homeless here in Los Angeles. And then a growing segment of the homeless population here is seniors. About 5,000 people living on our streets are seniors. That population, that segment of homelessness, increased last year by 22%. So what causes homelessness in Los Angeles? There are a number of different causes. Lower stagnant wages is a tremendous one. There is a 1/5 to a 1/4 of the population in Los Angeles County that lives under the poverty line, and that poverty line is probably not an adequate measure of what poverty actually is in Los Angeles, so it's an even larger percentage than that. We have become the city in the country with the most unaffordable housing market, and people are being driven from their homes on a regular basis. We have a mental health system that is underfunded, that is being cut by the federal government. The safety net is going, and which has several different flaws to it that we can discuss tonight. We also have, as I noted, a large population of people who become homeless as a result of domestic and sexual abuse. And then we have a tremendous lack of resources for veterans. The federal government has totally abandoned our veterans, and the city and the county are stepping in to do things at the VA to provide housing and shelter for them. Then there are people who struggle with addiction. And many people wound up homeless because of a struggle with addiction. But it's also worth noting, just as with mental health issues, there are many people who fall into addiction or fall into mental health as a result of becoming homeless. And then there are broken promises on criminal justice reform. Voters approved a couple different initiatives to reform the criminal justice system, to decriminalize a lot of stuff, with a promise that was made to the voters by the state that has not been fulfilled for opportunities and services for those who are getting out of jail. Our mayor has created, and our county board of supervisors have created programs to try to employ people and backfill that, but it is not enough to fill the broken promises from the state. So the intersection that causes people to hit homelessness is an intersection of some form of trauma and our overpriced housing market. And any number of things can cause people to fall into homelessness, whether it's a huge medical bill, being a victim of crime, low wages, a death in the family, failed relationship, anything like that. So what ends homelessness in Los Angeles? There's a lot of noise on social media about what does and what doesn't end homelessness. There are a number of things that end homelessness. One of them is an improved healthcare system and housing. Another one is an improved and fixed mental health care system and housing. Better paying jobs and housing. Family reunification, but you have to have a place to live when you go back to your family. If they don't have room for you, it doesn't work. Substance abuse treatment and housing. The common denominator to all the solutions is housing. It's not all... It isn't all permanent or expensive permanent supportive housing, although that is a solution for many. But if you are living on the streets right now and you are suffering from a mental illness, or you are abusing drugs and suffering from addiction, you are going to have a significantly easier time taking your medication, getting well, or getting off drugs or alcohol if there's a roof over your head than if you're living in a tent underneath the 405. So in this whole range of stuff, who does what? Most people here seem to think that the city is the point of action on homelessness. We are one of many different points. So when it comes to housing, that is essentially, not exclusively, but essentially on the city. It is the city's job to do the brick and mortar and to provide enough housing so that people have a place to live in Los Angeles. Healthcare, that is the responsibility of the County of Los Angeles. And we have people here tonight from the county and the Department of Public Health and Mental Health who will talk to you. Mental health services, also the County of Los Angeles. Substance abuse prevention and treatment, the state, county, and a number of different social service agencies. Veteran services, the federal government, again, breaking many, many promises to our vets. Law enforcement, that's on the city, that's LAPD. Sanitation, that's on the city, that's LAPD. On the local level, the folks that you can hold accountable are me and the mayor and the rest of the city council. On the county level, one of the more invisible levels of government in Los Angeles is our County Board of Supervisors. My district has overlaps with three of them. Sheila Kuehl, who has the Venice area and Pacific Palisades and Brentwood. Janice Hahn, who has Playa del Rey and part of Westchester. But Mark Ridley Thomas in the center and here is the one who represents the eastern part of Venice, Del Rey, Mar Vista, and other parts of the district. And Mark is actually, he can't be here tonight, but a number of folks from the county are here. Mark is actually the co-chair of Gavin Newsom's task force on homelessness. Now, both the city and the county, the meme is often that the only thing the city and the county are doing is trying to provide everybody a $700,000 unit of housing just for themselves. That is a fallacy. It is one of many strategies. The county has over 40 of them, and the city has over 60 of them. The main sources of funding, Measure H, which the voters approved, does homeless services. That's done by the county. The city's revenue source, main one, Triple H, is for brick and mortar only. It's to build capital. That's what the voters approved for us to use the money for. Proposition 63 is state funds that flow through the county to deal with mental health programs. And then the state has given last year a grant and this year an emergency grant to cities. This year it's called HAP. It's a one-time block grant to address immediate homelessness challenges. And then a lot of the vouchers that people who are homeless use to get housing, whether it's a Section 8 voucher, which has been dramatically cut by the federal government for 20 years, Democrat and Republican, and VASH vouchers, veteran vouchers, come from the federal government. Basic, the city can build the housing, but what happens in the housing, the services, is from the county. It's a partnership. So most of the work is done by a joint city-county agency called the Los Angeles Homeless Services Authority, LAHSA. And they filter money through contracts to social service agencies throughout the region, throughout the county, to actually do the outreach, to actually deliver the services, and to actually build the housing and get people off the streets. So just very quickly, what is the city of Los Angeles doing, since I'm the one doing the presentation? Strategies to prevent homelessness, stabilizing people who are suffering from trauma, either before or after they become homeless, providing temporary housing and shelter, like the bridge housing we're doing, building long-term housing, and responding to encampments, which we will have people from LAPD, the Mayor's Office, and Sanitation here to discuss. Eviction prevention, we just approved a big eviction prevention strategy in Council last week. At least 25 more, even more than that, coming of temporary bridge housing locations around the city. The Triple H funds that the voters approved, 8,625 units of supportive and affordable housing are being built with those dollars around the city of Los Angeles. Now, that's great, but I want faster and I want less expensive solutions. And most of my colleagues do too, and everybody's working on different strategies. My colleague Herb Wesson is looking at actually doing 3D printing of homes. Somebody else is looking at modular stuff. The two that I have been championing most vigorously have been shared housing, where people can get off the street, a lot of them, 41% of them within 2 days, into a roommate situation. It's not the solution for everybody, but it's a solution for a lot of people. I funded a pilot project in Venice with the organization Share. For 50 grand, they housed 30-something people in just 2 months. Another quick solution is master leasing. It is something the County of Los Angeles has done with healthcare dollars. Their Housing for Health program has been one of the best, most effective, most efficient homeless housing programs around. They take people who were coming frequently into emergency rooms and medical clinics and put them directly into housing by going out and renting a bunch of vacant units. So there's no wait. They go right in. On the street strategy, again, we have folks here who can talk more about it, but the city is moving towards a different approach towards encampments. We were wasting $30 million that wasn't cleaning up anything and wasn't helping anybody, and we're moving into an approach that is much more focused on public health, those in encampments and those outside of encampments. So very quickly to end, what's happening on the west side specifically? We have 493 units of housing in 8 projects coming online in this district with the Prop 8 funds. The former animal shelter in West LA near Pico and Bundy is going to become homeless housing. The Oxford Triangle Maintenance Yard in Venice is going to become homeless housing. We've got 1,200 units of housing for homeless vets coming at the VA campus. We're looking at doing a project with the Disability Community Rights Center at city-owned property at Venice and Beethoven to do housing for homeless people with disabilities there. Venice Community Housing and SPY, which you will hear from tonight, they have transitional housing for homeless youth in Mar Vista. We have safe parking at the VA, at my office in Westchester, and at my office in West LA, and we're looking for more. We're bringing online more mobile toilets, more hygiene services, and more frequent and regular predictable trash collection at encampments. And we're doing 2 temporary bridge housing sites. I'm still looking for more, but we're doing 2, one in Venice and one in Brentwood at the VA. And finally, I want to say thank you to the southern half of 90066, the community of Del Rey. For the past 6 or 7 years, the community of Del Rey has consistently said yes to projects to house homeless people, again and again, and is constantly looking for more places to do housing and to do safe parking. So thank you to Del Rey. So I'm going to end with the pace of progress. Here in Los Angeles, a few years ago, we were building about 9,600 units of homeless housing. Last year, that has more than doubled to 21,631. It is the most the city has ever done. There were, those were not units of housing, those were housing placements. Not just new units, but housing placements. 21,631. But at the same time, homelessness still went up. 12% in the county, 16% in the city. And I'm going to give you a little math thing to show you exactly how that happens. A year ago, 2018, we counted 886 homeless vets. And we housed 2,824 of them. So how many should be left? 1,062. But in reality, 3,878. Because people are becoming as homeless as quickly as we can house them. There are many, many pipelines into homelessness, and they're fast. You slide right into it when you have a medical crisis. You slide right into it when you have a trauma or an eviction. But there are very few ways out, and they're not fast enough. And that is the singular mission that we need to accomplish, is to find more and faster ways out and to prevent people from falling in. But in the meantime, that leaves us where we began, with encampments everywhere. And there is a myth out there is a lie out there in social media and other places that this is what people want, that this is what the government has decided to tolerate. We want to leave people on the street, or nobody is doing anything to try to change that circumstance. In fact, I enumerated a number of the different things that are happening, and one of the biggest impediments to us accomplishing that is people trying to litigate against or stop the solutions that we're trying to do. So we have a very stark situation that we face as we propose solutions in every neighborhood of Los Angeles. We can either have people living in encampments, or we can have them living in housing. We can either have people's belongings piled up on the sidewalk in front of our kids' schools, so God forbid they have to walk in the middle of the damn street to get to school, or we can provide storage for people. We can have people using our parkways or our alleys as toilets, or we can actually provide hygiene services for people. And we can have people living in cars on our streets, or we can double down and we can expand safe parking. There has nary been a complaint in Westchester or West LA about the safe parking programs we have had there. So, what can you do? That's what we will be discussing for the rest of the evening. We'll do Q&A, again from the panel and from the audience. So I'm going to begin by introducing our moderator. Many of you know her. Carol Costello was an anchor on CNN and on Headline News for many, many years. She has covered the most significant stories of our times, from 9/11 to Barack Obama's election, to the Casey Anthony saga, to natural disasters. She has covered it all. She is now here in Los Angeles. She is a professor of journalism just down the road at Loyola Marymount University, and we are very pleased to welcome her here tonight to moderate the discussion and the Q&A afterwards. Carol?
Hello, everyone, and welcome, and thank you so much for being here tonight. We want to have like an in-depth, cohesive civil conversation, and the councilman has been kind enough to assemble 15 experts from the city, the county, and nonprofit institutions to answer any question you might have. As you know, you submitted written questions before the event began, and I have many here. Look at how many I have. It's amazing, and this is not all of them. I will ask the questions of these experts for the first 45 minutes of tonight's assembly. After that 45 minutes is up, we're going to open it up and allow you to ask questions directly of the panelists. That, too, will last 45 minutes. You will have section leaders. The audience is kind of like, divided into sections right now. Those section leaders will assemble 5 of you at a time, so we won't have long lines down the aisles, and it can be more organized, right? That's what we want, so that you'll be able to ask your questions in an organized fashion so these panelists can answer as many questions as is possible. I'd like to introduce the panelists right now before we get to the ground rules. And remember, there are 15, so it's going to take some time. So, first panelist come out, Christina Miller. She's the Deputy Mayor of Homelessness. Heidi Marston is the Chief Program Officer of the LA Homeless Services Authority. Phil Ansel is from the LA County Homeless Initiative. Brian Buckner is the Chief of the Mayor's Office for the United Homelessness Response Center. Meg Barclay is the Chief Administrative Officer of the Homelessness Coordinator. Allison Hurst is the Allison! Allison Hurst is the Executive Director of SPY, the Safe Space for Youth. Libby Boyce is the LA County Housing for Health Director of Access, Referral, and Engagement. Duane Moses is from the St. Joseph Center. He's the Director of Outreach there. Maria Funk is from the Countywide Housing, Employment, and Education Resource Development Department. Nick Holt is from the Countywide Housing, Employment, and Education Resource Development Center. Lena Miller is from the Urban Alchemy. And Andre Perry can answer questions about HHH, and he is from the Housing and Community Investment Department. And of course, Councilman Mike Bonin will also be answering questions. I do have some ground rules to share before I get to the questions. And the reason for these ground rules is we really want to have a civil conversation, and we want to be able to answer all of your questions, and we want to get to as many as possible. So these are the ground rules. Please, please be respectful of your neighbors and of the speakers. I know the passions are high and the room is crowded, but if you try to yell over speakers or disrupt the town hall, I'm going to have to ask you to leave. Please, please do not block people's views with signs or by standing in front of seated people. If you start blocking the view for people behind you, again, I'll first ask you to put the sign down, and then if you don't cooperate, I'm just going to have to ask you to leave. And last of all, please keep the applause and noise from the audience to a minimum so we can get to as many questions as possible in the time we have this evening. So without further ado, I'm going to get right to the questions. I'm going to start with the written questions, and this part of the program will last 45 minutes, and I'll get right to it with a question that's right to the point. Why is camping allowed on public sidewalks? And I guess Brian can best answer that question.
Right off the bat. Well, thank you for the opportunity to be here. Thank you to Councilmember Bonin and then to all of our colleagues up here on the panel. And the answer is that it's the public right of way, it's public space, and the courts have said that people have the right to camp in the public space.
And if anyone, other panelists want to jump in and further add to that answer, please feel free to do that.
Hi, I'm Meg Barclay. I'm the City Homeless Coordinator in the CAO's office, and very glad to be here tonight. Thank you, Mr. Bonin. I would just add to Brian's response that in addition to that being public space and being in a public right-of-way, the courts have found that we are not allowed to restrict activities that are an inevitable side effect of being human, without being, such as sleeping and being in a public right-of-way, without providing an alternative. And so until we can ensure that there is a shelter bed that is available for anybody, we cannot restrict where people are allowed to sleep.
Okay, so the obvious question, right, is why can't you change the city law to make living in public spaces illegal?
It's not a matter of city law, it's a matter of court rulings. The city, one of my colleagues recently proposed something to try to challenge that. To be honest, I thought it was an overreaching attempt that the court would reject. I have said that I think that we could do restrictions not on where people can be, but on where their belongings can be. The more storage we provide, the more flexibility we would have. But I think that we could probably get away with some discrete restrictions of belongings near schools and maybe homeless shelters. But the courts have been very clear they did not leave us much latitude at all. And the mandate has been, for well over a decade now, has been to Los Angeles, build some damn housing and get people off the streets.
Next question. This is from Cindy. We sometimes feel under siege from the criminal elements setting up camps. Crime is increasing in our neighborhood. It's unsafe to walk. There are confrontations, etc. What are we supposed to do?
So good evening, folks. I'm Commander Don Graham. I'm the department's homeless coordinator. Sorry about the funny angle. So the criminal element that's involved in this is our issue. And it is the commitment of the chief of police to enforce the criminal statutes when they are applicable, regardless of a person's status of housed or unhoused. However, as you all know, and in the last two questions that were asked about the regulatory sections about camping in the streets, I'm sure that there's folks out there right now that could probably quote the Boise decision by rote memory or understand 5611 as it exists. Those are regulatory sections, and yes, they do exist on the books. And my officers and the officers that work Pacific Division go out there with their counterparts and they attempt to get voluntary compliance. because we don't want to further traumatize people with the unnecessary application. I'll wait.
Okay, we're going to have to allow the gentleman to answer the question.
So, that leading with services has been the mandate of this city. And so the Los Angeles Police Department is committed to supporting the efforts of permanently ending homelessness by getting people off of the streets and into permanent supportive housing. If you see criminal activity and you're reporting it to Pacific Division, and I know Jim Setzer, and I know Captain Roberts, and I know the people that work for them, and they're very hard-working police officers dedicated to their craft. And so that criminal piece that's involved in that is something we absolutely want to deal with as the police department, and we do. Now, as to the proliferation of tents in the public thoroughfare, yes, there's regulations that are involved in that, and we do try to allocate the resources that are necessary to get compliance. We work with our partners to do that. But unfortunately, there is resource limitations based upon the number of police officers that we have doing this work, the number of police officers that we have doing the normal patrol work that we all need to function as a city. And quite frankly, it's been illegal to speed for the entire 24-year tenure of my career. I've written hundreds of speeding tickets, and yet people are still speeding. And so it becomes a matter of ratio.
Okay. Nick. I'm going to move to the next question now. This is from Elizabeth. There was a proposed amendment to Section 4118 to implement a restriction of encampments within 500 yards of schools, parks, and churches. I've been informed that the city attorney did not accept that proposal and sent it back for further review. Why did that happen?
There was a proposal similar to what was described. The city attorney didn't reject it. A number of different council members raised concerns that when you added all the different layers of it together, it covered everything, and it was blatantly unconstitutional. It also had in it a provision that people could be cited for doing something that someone else may find offensive or threatening. And if you spend any time at all paying attention to race relations in this country, there are African Americans who are getting the cops called on them for selling lemonade, for sleeping in their dorms. And we knew that an ordinance like that was legally questionable, but also would have some horrible racial implications. So we sent it back to committee where the author may be reworking it. I'm not sure.
Yeah, and just another caution, hold your applause and also the boos, because we do want to I got a pile of questions here. Next question, this is from Jared. What additional efforts is this council taking to address the additional waste, trash, and sanitary issues caused by unhoused individuals, issues beyond what the city's sanitation workers can address?
Do you want Gabe to take it from sanitation? Or?
Maybe you can
Brian?
set it up and then Gabe.
Sure. So we all know that recently, there's been a lot of attention given to the amount of trash that's on the street. And one thing that I want to make clear that our boss, the mayor, always likes to say is that 80% of the trash that's collected by our Bureau of Sanitation is from illegal dumping. It's not from homeless encampments, which is a myth. And so
Hold on. Please continue.
So we have significantly increased the amount of resources that the city is dedicated to not just illegal dumping collection, meaning they're going out and collecting the trash that was illegally dumped, but also increasing our enforcement efforts. Our Bureau of Sanitation Watershed Protection Division are actually, according to state law enforcement officers, and so they have the legal authority to enforce against illegal dumpers, and so they've significantly increased our enforcement efforts. In addition to that, the city has really shifted the way that it's approaching providing services both to the housed and the unhoused individuals in our communities, and that's through a program that we call CARE, which stands for Comprehensive Cleaning and Rapid Engagement. And what the care team or care teams do is, or actually one of the things that they do is they've actually provided an additional 500 trash cans specifically along routes where we know there are concentrations of homeless encampments. And every day from 6 a.m. to 8 a.m., those trash cans are serviced. And so our care teams are providing, just like you or I get regular trash service, people experiencing homelessness on the streets of Los Angeles are also getting regular trash service. And we have a representative from our Livability Services Division in sanitation, which manages a lot of these programs, and he can tell you exactly the tonnage and the amount of trash that they've collected that's no longer on our streets. And so we've made a commitment to, I mean, as Commander Graham mentioned, voluntary compliance. Our goal is really to help people and empower people on the street to be able to keep their area clean, because we know that really what we have to do is provide for a safer, cleaner, and more accessible environment for everyone, the people experiencing homelessness who are living on the street, and for the community.
Here is another question along those lines, because I think a lot of people are concerned, when I've read through these questions, not only about the trash, but about the human waste that they sometimes find in their lawns and on the streets.
Sure. So another important part of the CARE program is we have a CARE, and then we have what we call a CARE Plus. The CARE teams are smaller, more nimble teams, and each council district has their own CARE team. We have an additional 13 CARE Plus teams, which are just a larger footprint, more sanitation workers, more outreach workers from LASA, but also we are providing hygiene trailers. So the goal is eventually by next March or April, to roll out 13 total hygiene trailers that will be providing showers and restroom services to people experiencing homelessness across the city. So they'll be providing that every day across the city. In addition to that, we have our 17 pit stop programs, which are publicly available toilets that are attended, and we have a representative from the nonprofit organization that provides the staff for those pit stops. And so what the city is doing is significantly increasing the sort of hygiene services, shower, restroom, bathrooms, services, so that people have more
Where will those sanitation trailers be?
Sorry?
Where will those sanitation trailers be?
So those sanitation trailers will move around the city. So there are some places across the city that already have infrastructure built in and would allow these trailers to connect directly to the sewer system and to a water source. And so those are locations that are going to get repeated visits from these hygiene trailers. But they will be moving around the city to different spots that are priorities to the council district and that are priorities to the city based on the acuity or the need of the encampments and the people living on the street and the communities impacted by that.
And just to add on that, because Supervisor Kuehl a few months ago made an analogy saying that the forces that I outlined that cause homelessness is like people being pushed off a roof. And the city and the county are walking around under the roof with a net trying to catch people. And the ones that do not get caught are the ones who are living in encampments. And while we are looking, as Brian detailed, to add more bathrooms so people have the ability to make that choice I framed up there between going on the parkway or your alleyway and going in a restroom, the more urgent thing is finding ways to get them out of the encampments. And the Bridge Home program that the mayor created is specifically designed to get people off of streets in areas of high concentrations of encampments, people from that area specifically getting into encampments, which is a hell of a lot better than just having access to a toilet periodically.
And people are very concerned about the encampments and health issues associated with those encampments. This question is, how will we prevent the spread of disease like what happened in downtown Los Angeles?
Sanitation or public health?
They just said disease.
Sanitation.
Sanitation? Yeah.
Good evening, everybody. I'm Gabe Miranda, Division Manager with Livability Services Division with LA Sanitation and Environment. Thank you, Councilman Bonin, for having us here today. As Brian Buckner mentioned, I oversee the CARE operation. And there are three major programs here in the CD11 area, one being the CD11 CARE team, which is dedicated to this district Monday through Friday. In addition, the Care Plus operation, which is a larger footprint, which requires that 24-hour posted notice and a thorough comprehensive cleaning. In addition, the Operation Healthy Streets Care Plus operation that's ongoing in the Venice area along the boardwalk, which happens every Friday. So we are the designated administrative agency at regulating private property on the public right-of-way. We have environmental compliance inspectors who are trained at assessing health hazards and ensuring that we remove any health hazards that are a danger to any folks experiencing homelessness and, of course, the public. So we provide this type of service daily as part of this CARE program to ensure that we protect public health and the environment.
Phil, I want to add something.
Yeah. And good evening. I'm Phil Ensel. I'm the director of the Los Angeles County Homeless Initiative. Thank you for having me, Councilman. I wanted to add on this question that the Board of Supervisors recently approved funding for 8 dedicated public health nurses who will be accompanying outreach teams to encampments which the county's Department of Public Health has identified pose particular public health risks, and that will be their full-time responsibility.
Okay, next question. This is from Ava. There is this weird belief among homeless advocates that the homeless should be allowed to live wherever they want. Why? As a person with a home, my choices are limited as to what I can afford. They can't afford anything, and they certainly deserve to live somewhere, but why do they have a wider range of choices than I do? Heidi, do you want to tackle that?
So thanks for the question, Christina Miller. I'm with the Mayor's Office. So this idea about choice and living in public space is a really complicated one. And I think just the level set, it really is the belief of, I think, many folks up here and I think a lot of people in the audience that that's actually a false choice. Because if someone doesn't have an affordable place to move into, or if someone we don't have an interim housing or a shelter bed for them, there really is no choice except the streets, right? So the focus of the city and the county and certainly Councilmember Bonin is to create those indoor places for people to live and to give them more choices. And I hear in this person's question is also the idea that it's not just people who are homeless who are struggling with the cost of housing, it's a lot of people, right? Affordable housing is actually an issue for not just people who are living outside, but for many Angelenos. That's including our young people who are thinking about moving out of their homes. Where am I going to live? How can I afford it? So affordability is an issue that spans across many populations. And just to go back to the question, we need to give people more choices. And we do believe firmly that if we gave them those choices, most people would take us up on it and move inside.
And I'll add 2 things to that. One, to her point about the affordable housing crisis. The city, the mayor, the council, the county are all doing a number of different things to address the broader affordable housing crisis, so everybody has more choices, whether it's the eviction prevention, whether it's a linkage fee, whether it's requirements for more affordable housing. One of my colleagues, Mr. Wesson, yesterday proposed that any city property, if any housing gets built on it, it's 100% affordable housing, and that includes workforce housing for teachers and nurses who are struggling to find a place to live. But the question, I think the underlying premise of the question is one I hear quite often, and it's a variation on why should we be building on the west side? The land is very expensive here. We should be building somewhere else. And the variation on the question always tends to be further east. It's either east of Lincoln, or it's east of the 710, or it's out in the Inland Empire. So there's a couple different answers to that. One, we don't run Lancaster or Barstow. That's not part of our jurisdiction. And there's resistance to homeless housing on the west side. There's resistance in Sherman Oaks. There's resistance in South LA. There's resistance in Koreatown. And you know what? There's resistance in Barstow and in Lancaster as well. But the important thing that we need to know is that this is an unprecedented crisis. This isn't like homelessness we have ever encountered before, and there's multiple factors that go into it. And there are the factors that I named that contribute to it aren't getting any better, and those aren't ones that the city or the county, most of them, that we control. So we all need to be rowing in the same direction. All 15 council members, all 15 council districts. And every council member has committed to do bridge housing. Every council member has committed to do permanent supportive housing. And the easiest place for us to do permanent supportive housing is on government-owned land, so that the cost of the land is factored out of the equation and it's easier to build.
Another question along those lines. This is from Robert. Do you think we're obligated to pay for housing for people from other states that are bringing illegal drugs to our neighborhoods and sleeping on our streets?
Who was it for?
This is a question from Robert. So Heidi or Christina?
So I would just say, when we talk about folks from other states, what we know about the population is 2/3 of the people who are experiencing homelessness at any given time have not only been living in Los Angeles or became homeless in Los Angeles, but have been here more than 10 years, more than 20 years consistently. There's certainly a part of the population that comes here. We have places like Hollywood that are attractive to young individuals. I think California is a place that people want to come to. However, it's not the majority of who we see. The people who are experiencing homelessness on the street are our neighbors and the people that have lived here for a long time.
Okay. What about the other third, Councilman Bonin?
I'll add one note to that. Is I will. Well, that's what I'm trying to do. Even if the number is 1/3 that are from somewhere else, that's a large number. Now, I moved from somewhere else, and I almost became homeless very quickly after getting here. And I was able to turn myself around. But even if it's 1/3, that is a large number, and that's something that is a concern. And that is something that we hear a lot about. Another thing we hear a lot about, another suggestion, is probably a question in there, is why aren't we more quickly locking up people who are suffering from a mental illness? Whether or not you think that is a good idea or a bad idea, whether or not you think it is a good idea or a bad idea for us to deny services to people from out of state, those things are not things that we are legally empowered to do. So the situation that we're faced with is we walk down the street and there's someone living in an encampment. What do? Do we leave them in the encampment so that you have a problem walking to work, or your kid feels scared walking to school because there's no room on the sidewalk, or do we house them? Given the framework we have, those are the choices we have, and that's what the choices we make and act on.
This is a question from David, and he is concerned about developers buying homes and leaving them vacant for a period of time so that homeless people can move into those vacant homes and use them for nefarious purposes.
Okay, well, that one's me. That actually is a significant problem. We have an affordable housing crisis in Los Angeles, and by some estimates in Los Angeles County, we have 200,000 vacant housing units. In the city of Los Angeles, by some estimates, 110,000 vacant units. Other jurisdictions have taken action on this. Oakland recently passed a vacancy tax in order to push people into putting their units back onto the rental market. Vancouver did it, and 15% of their units went back on the market. If that were to happen here, that's another 15,000 units of housing that go back on the market that helps the tension in the rental market. I have proposed that we go to the voters in 2020 with a ballot initiative to establish such a system here in Los Angeles.
A lot of these, I'm just going through these questions as quickly as I can and trying to organize them, so if I'm asking things out of order, it's because I can't get through them quickly enough. This question's from Lisa. What are you doing to protect the children to go to elementary schools when they have to pass by these encampments and you know, the bus stops are a problem too. Like, what are you doing to protect children who have to pass some people that they may be afraid of? Anybody? Anybody want to answer?
Yeah.
Does Don?
Don?
It's
Don, you want to answer that?
done.
So, I mean, I was like, Don, and the premise of that question is the predisposition. Sorry. So I know everybody was asking, it's a safety question, so it's got to go to the police department. So as you well know, the police department is out there, and we do patrols based upon radio calls, crime trends. The commands meet on a daily basis to come up with crime strategies in order to deal with those issues. The senior lead officers go to your neighborhood watch meetings, they take your information, they input those requests into that crime control process so that police cars are located in the areas that are critical to our public safety issues. But forgive me, but it sounds more like that question is legislative in nature and not enforcement in nature. So I think we all understand the premise of what the police do and how they go about doing that. I can expand on that if that was the nature of the question. But I think this is more of a legislative issue and discussing about 4118 and what people may have been hearing about the debate that's going on right now about the 4118 of the municipal code.
So to further answer that, the answer is what I said at the beginning. We need to get rid of encampments. And the only way to get rid of encampments is to replace them with housing, shelter, and services.
Okay, on to the next question. What are you doing to address the housing deficit, not only in your district, but also in the city?
Did you want to talk about
Anybody?
You want to do the city? I'll do the district.
Sure. So we understand that there's a housing shortage across the city. In fact, there was a report that came out in May that said LA County has a deficit of over 500,000 affordable housing units, right? And that's not just homeless housing, but affordable housing in general. So to fill that gap is going to take, and speaking honestly, that's going to take a very long time. It's going to take us a very long time to get out of the mess we have with our housing shortage. What we are doing right now is looking at ways we can densify neighborhoods and build more, right? So right now there are 35 community plans that are being revisited because we have underbuilt for decades. So to focus on how we can find more housing in neighborhoods that have underbuilt for decades is one of the strategies. I'll say specifically for homeless housing, we have the Triple H program, which at this point, the $1.2 billion bond measure that aims to create 10,000 units of supportive housing over the course of 10 years. The good news is that we have allocated all of those monies to projects. The bad news is we've allocated all those monies to projects, right? So we have units in the pipeline that we are in the process of permitting and that are under construction, but we need additional resources. This really is a resource issue by and large, and so the mayor and certainly the city council and the county are turning our attention to both the state and the feds to figure out ways to get additional resources to fill that deficit.
And here on the west side, the housing shortage and the housing crisis has contributed not only to people being gentrified out or squeezed out of their longtime family homes, has contributed not only to people being homeless, it's also contributed dramatically to traffic congestion. The daytime population of the west side is twice as much as the nighttime population. There's a dramatic jobs housing imbalance, which also creates all sorts of environmental issues as well. So here on the west side, we just actually, yesterday I believe, we gave the final approval to a rezoning of the area in West LA around the Expo line, which will allow more housing right there at transit. And I took what was proposed by the planning department and I actually substantially beefed up the percentage of it that was required for affordable housing. We're also, half the city council is going to a meeting tomorrow of a regional association of governments to try to put more pressure on some of our neighboring cities to build more housing. There's a formula out there that is saying Los Angeles has this responsibility, but some of our neighboring cities don't have a sufficient responsibility, and we're looking to change that tomorrow so that the burden is shared by everybody.
And again, if any of the panelists want to jump in and answer these questions, please do. Don't wait for me to say your name. You just jump right in and answer the question. I'm A-okay with that. Does anyone want to add to that? Because the next question has to do with the cost of the permanent housing.
Yeah, actually, I'd like to make one addition. There's an opportunity to increase housing, which is largely affordable housing, called accessory dwelling units. And accessory dwelling units, the colloquial name is a granny flat or a backyard home. And as a result, California law has allowed homeowners to build a granny flat or accessory dwelling unit for a good number of years. But recent changes in state law have made it much easier to do so. And both the City of Los Angeles and in the unincorporated areas, the County of Los Angeles, have very much embraced the new state law, and there has been an incredible increase in permits and actual construction of ADUs. The benefits of ADUs are that there are no land costs because they are built in the backyard of existing single-family residences, and therefore they are much cheaper, and accordingly, in general, the associated rent is much lower than another newly built rental housing unit. Just this year, Governor Newsom signed a bill to submit to allow most homeowners to build a second or junior accessory dwelling unit, which is one that's attached to the primary unit, either an attached converted garage or that's attached to actually a room with a kitchen and bathroom and a separate entrance in the main house. So I mention that because particularly on the west side, where land is so expensive, ADUs are an excellent opportunity to increase the supply of housing, and specifically affordable housing. And for homeowners who are in the audience tonight, building an ADU and renting it to someone who needs affordable housing, whether it's someone who's currently homeless or otherwise, is an opportunity for homeowners to increase the value of your property, increase your monthly income, and contribute to solving the region's affordable housing crisis.
And along those lines, and you probably answered this question already, because to build a permanent unit, it costs $500,000. So this question is it fiscally responsible to build homeless housing units that cost more than $500,000 per unit?
So I think that this is a really unfortunate and common misconception of Proposition HHH and the permanent supportive housing units that are being built with this funding. Those units may cost that much to build, and that is because we have the tightest construction market in the entire country. I would like to finish. The construction market tightened as soon as Proposition HHH passed, and construction costs are high in every kind of housing up and down the market. The distinction that needs to be made when it comes to the cost of Proposition HHH and other publicly subsidized housing, the overall cost of the unit may be $500,000. The cost to the city on average for Proposition HHH is $150,000. There's a difference between the cost of the unit and the cost to the city. And the cost to the city is $150,000 per unit. The balance of the costs of those projects is being leveraged from other sources of funds that are not city funding.
The other thing I should say about...
Okay.
Oh, no, please go ahead.
Okay, wait, we're going to continue answering this question. Please.
I feel like I'm at a national spelling bee competition with these lights in front of my eyes. So
You could pick up the mic, too. That was a good suggestion from an audience member.
So hi everyone, my name is Andre Perry. I'm the manager of the HHH program, recently a new employee with HSID LA. Previous to this, my experience has been in real estate development, both at nonprofits as well as at for-profits, so I have a little bit of insight with respect to the cost. And I would say that there's several factors. I don't know if I'm going to keep bending over backwards like this or standing straight up. Hold on. There's several factors that have to be taken into consideration when we think about supportive housing versus other type of housing stock. The first is that, particularly with projects that we're building that are effectively supportive housing, which is effectively housing with services or affordable housing with services, oftentimes in the budget, we actually include a reserve to actually pay for some of those services, which is not necessarily the case when you compare it to a typical apartment building. So that's the first issue. The second issue is that, as Meg mentioned a few moments ago, Developers, contractors are dealing with issues like tariffs, some of our geopolitical issues. Did this stop? Okay.
No.
Some of our geopolitical issues actually impact us here at home. Cost of lumber, cost of steel, the impact of tariffs, that actually has real life impacts to projects that we have here in Los Angeles.
Okay, please let
Let
him
me speak
answer
to
the question.
Allow me to speak to the issue of developer fees. So with respect to affordable housing, it's a rental product. If you compare that with a condo, the profit margin that you receive is actually in the sale price. So the cost to build a condo on a per unit basis will always be less because we have services, we have a profit margin. Even the nonprofits don't build this stuff for free. They have to continue to operate their nonprofits and also provide the reserves necessary to make certain that the property is not only constructed, but that it continues to operate. So those are some of the unique differences. I would add in addition, here in Los Angeles, for projects that have over 65 units, we are also subject to a project labor agreement for those developments. Then you add one other condition, which you don't see in projects that are built like condos. If there is a rental subsidy or funds that come from a federal source, the entire project is subject to what is called Davis-Bacon wages. So if the project is built up to, I think it's 5 stories, it's considered Davis-Bacon residential, and beyond that, Davis-Bacon commercial. So the wage rates that contractors charge their subs are going to be different, in many cases higher, so that they can have a livable wage compared to an apartment building that is not necessarily affordable or a condo. So those are so even though from the outside they may look like similar structures, it's really an apples and oranges comparison because it's a different business model, build and flip versus build and rent. Secondly, the supportive housing has services often built into the budget so that the issues that the community is addressing today can continue to be addressed throughout the life of the property. And then third, you have the issue of livable wage rates paid to the contractors per federal law. So if this building was not even built in Los Angeles, it was built anywhere in the country, if there were federal sources, you have to comply with what the local Davis-Bacon federal wage rates are for those developments.
So maybe, because this question kind of gets to the heart of, I think, what people want to really know. It's like, why do the neighborhoods not see any results from the billions of dollars spent by Prop H and HHH?
So I'll answer that. I'm going to answer both of those questions. Because the last question about the permanent supportive housing, this may be one of the most important things I can say tonight. Because every time there is a conversation about solving homelessness in Los Angeles, every time there's a social media debate about it, somebody throws in, they're trying to build a $500,000, $600,000, $700,000 unit for everybody. It's never going to work. It's insane. It is a conversation stopper. And everybody in government and in social services falls victim to the conversation and lets that be the conversation. Let me be very clear. Permanent supportive housing is a solution for a certain segment of the homeless population. Permanent supportive housing is the nationally proven, demonstrated everywhere, most effective model to permanently house someone who is chronically homeless. And chronically homeless has a definition. It means you have a disability or you've been homeless for a long time. This is a specific definition. It is by far the most effective intervention for that. But that is not the main thing that we're doing, and it's not even the most homeless people. The chronic homeless population in Los Angeles is something like 25% of the people on the streets. For someone who becomes homeless next week, that's not the intervention. What we need for the person who's homeless next week is one of the other 50 or 60 things the city and the county is doing. A short-term rental subsidy might be exactly what somebody needs if they've just become homeless, to help them make ends meet for 6 months while they stabilize. And they're good, and they're done. For a long time, there was too much of an investment in only permanent supportive housing, so people were told, you're not homeless enough until we help them. Now, because of the county supervisors, because of the mayor, because of my colleagues and I, we're trying to build out a way to house the other 80%. That's the important thing to do. That's one segment for one portion of the homeless population. All the other things we've talked about, rapid rehousing, shared housing, master leasing, those are ways to get people off much, much more quickly. And the reason, to Carol's second question, that you're not seeing results is that little math equation that I showed you about the VA, the veterans. We housed half the veterans, and the veteran homeless population did not change because people are becoming homeless faster than we can house them. On our end, we haven't built enough damn housing for people. On the federal level, they have been cutting housing vouchers, affordable housing vouchers, for 20 years. Only 1 in 10 people who need a housing voucher in Los Angeles actually get it. It's impossible for us, to use Sheila's analogy, to catch all these people falling off the roof with the net that we have. We're going to keep running around with the net and try to house people, but we need people to stop pushing people off the top of the roof.
Is there any way for people to track where the money is going?
I'm responsible for administering Measure H for the County of Los Angeles, so I would like to answer this question about why Los Angeles County residents have generally not noticed a visible decrease in the number of people experiencing homelessness since the voters approved Proposition Triple H in November 2016 and then Measure H in March of 2017. The short answer is because too many people are becoming homeless. And I'll say a little bit more about that. This 2-year Measure H report card, which is available on the literature table, identifies the number of people who have moved into permanent housing and into interim housing directly as a result of Measure H during the first 2 years from July 2017 through June 2019. Nearly 32,000 family members and individuals moved into interim housing funded in whole or in part by Measure H during that 2-year period. And 16,003 adults, youth, and family members moved into permanent housing directly as a result of Measure H. When we look at the homeless services system as a whole, over 21,000 family members and individuals moved into permanent housing in calendar year 2018, which is more than double the number who moved into permanent housing in 2015 before Measure H and Proposition Triple H were enacted. Overall, in 2018, 133 people per day exited homelessness in Los Angeles County, either through direct assistance from the homeless service system, through minimal assistance from the homeless service system, or on their own. But every day in 2018, 150 people fell into homelessness in Los Angeles County. So if 133 people a day exited homelessness and 150 people a day became homeless, that means that 17 more people every day became homeless than exited. And that translates into a 12% increase in the countywide homeless population between January 2018 and January 2019. Now, when we look at the other urban counties in California, what we see is that Los Angeles County experienced the smallest increase in the homeless population of any major urban county in the state between January 2018 and January 2019. And that is directly attributable to the results of Proposition Triple H and Measure H and this overall countywide movement to prevent and combat homelessness that has activated hundreds of organizations and thousands of people, over 100,000 people who have signed up for United Way of Greater Los Angeles, Everyone In campaign, to help bring our homeless neighbors home. So the fundamental solution here, as the councilman indicated, is that we have to slow the flow of people into homelessness. And the fundamental reason that people are becoming homeless in Los Angeles County is because they cannot afford the rent. Either they cannot afford to continue paying the rent where they're currently living when they're faced with an exorbitant rent increase, or when they're looking for housing, for whatever reason that they are looking for housing, they're unable to find housing they can afford. Over 700,000 households in Los Angeles County, renter households, pay over 50% of their income for rent. Every one of those households is precariously housed. Every one of those households is at risk of becoming homeless as a result of a single unexpected event. A car breakdown, a relationship breakup, a layoff, a reduction in hours, any of those things can cause a family or an individual that's paying 50 or 60 or 70 or 80% of their income for rent to fall into homelessness. Now, in this past year, the legislature and the governor and Los Angeles City Council and the Board of Supervisors have taken a series of very important policy actions to try to stem that flow into homelessness. Limiting rental increases for all rental housing, multifamily rental housing, built more than 15 years ago on a statewide basis to 5% plus the rate of inflation. Prohibiting evictions unless there's just cause. Prohibiting landlords from discriminating against families and individuals with a federal or locally funded rental subsidy. These are the sorts of critical public policy actions that can be taken at the state and local level and have been taken by our local and statewide elected leadership, but those actions by themselves will not be sufficient to fundamentally stem the tide of people falling into homelessness. That will require a substantial increase in the availability of affordable and other housing, because in an economy where market forces determine the cost of housing, particularly for vacant housing, which is not subject to rent control or rent stabilization under current California law, the shortage of supply will continue to drive up the cost of housing and the number of people who become homeless. Okay. My final point here is that if we could magically turn off the spigot and have no one become homeless and kept helping people exit homelessness at the same rate that we are now, in a little over a year, not one person in Los Angeles County would be homeless.
Okay. I want to end this portion of the program by bringing Zed in, and a question for you, Zed. Is it true that homeless people settled in housing can be positive members in our community?
Yes.
Well, hopefully we will hear more from Zed in the second portion of our program. All right. Now we begin the second portion of our program where we take live questions from the audience. You're going to have section leaders. They have gathered 5. So if you have a question, raise your hand. The section leaders. Oh, I didn't bring any. The section leaders will assemble the 5 people. They'll ask their questions. The questions can only be 30 seconds long. If it's longer than 30 seconds, I'm going to have to cut you off because I want to get to as many people as possible. So, section leaders, let's begin. Can we turn on some lights? We're going to try. Are we ready for the first question, panelists? Oh, there's a light spotlight.
Zed,
Okay.
Zed, was there anything
Now I
more you
can
wanted
see
to say?
well.
I know you wanted to speak at the beginning of the second portion. Zed did want to say one more thing, Carol.
Okay, Zed, go ahead. Okay, please can be respectful for Zed. He'd like to say one more thing before we begin, please.
I will make this short for you. My name is Zed Aquarian. I've been with Venice Community Housing, Public Supportive Housing.
Please allow Zed to speak.
Since 2003. And I was on the streets homeless in Venice Beach, where I've lived since 1974. And through patterns of life and loss of job and difficulties that have been mentioned, I lost my housing and I was on the streets. But I was at least capable enough to respond to the resources and reach out to St. Joseph's Housing, which was the housing authority before Venice Community Housing. And I got homeless assistance and Section 8 after 8 years of working every day on it. Now the timeline is much shorter and it can be done quicker, but the whole solution is to end the flow like we're talking about. And Venice Community Housing has some outstanding solutions to help take a lot of homeless off into the local area and maintain the cultural integrity of our artistic community, which I'm an artist, and I need my housing to be able to create my fine art. And that's what I have today because of these supportive services and because of the outreach of the City of LA and the county.
Thank you, Zed. Thank you very much. All right. Could I have the first questioner before the mic? You have 30 seconds to ask your questions. Ready? Okay, we're picking out our 5 audience members from each section so that they can form a line.
Open up rent control so that it covers more homes than just homes that were built before 1979.
Short answer is we're prohibited by state law, a law called the Costa-Hawkins Act that has frozen Los Angeles' rent control in place. The corollary to that is the state recently passed a bill that will somewhat, not as good as LA, but limit exorbitant rent increases for the next few years for newer buildings, I think from 95 and older, but it's 2005. But it's mainly the state law doesn't allow the city of Los Angeles to do it.
Next question.
Hi, I've heard a lot about what you're doing for the homeless. I've heard a lot of great things. I've seen beautiful apartment buildings. What about people that are living in homes, that are working, that now homeschool their kids, which is me, because they don't want their kids to walk past people shooting up in the streets?
I have a young kid as well. I have a little boy, and we live in Mar Vista. We live near Venice Boulevard. I've walked him to school past encampments. One of his favorite restaurants is near an encampment on Venice Boulevard. One of his favorite places to go on a Sunday is the Mar Vista Farmers Market. The playground he goes to, there are homeless people who are living in the park he goes to. I understand completely what you're saying. I feel the frustration. I feel the anger. I want the damn encampments gone as well. I do not want anyone living on the streets. And everything we say, everything anyone up here has said about what we are trying to do to get people off the streets, into shelter, into long-term housing, into services, while that direct intervention is to help house them, It is to do the most effective thing we can do to solve the problem of the encampments. The best thing I can do to end encampments is to find ways to house people more quickly and to prevent them from becoming homeless in the first place.
Next question.
Hello. Do you think that do you think that you're doing all the ways possible to make sure that you're not asking the question, should we do this or not? Because since this is clearly a crisis that we should take care of, and ask more the question, how do we do this? And working with stakeholders, how to do this. And not even asking, should we do this? Because it's clear we should build more housing, we should do all these services, but how we can do it.
Yeah, okay, so I'll take it. Not everybody understood the question. There is not everybody who agrees that we should be doing it. There's not everybody, certainly, who agrees we should be doing permanent supportive housing or bridge housing, or that we should be doing anything in the city of Los Angeles. So the question of should is still very much on the table as we, on really a daily basis, try to keep addressing the question of how to do it. The reason I'm pushing the shared housing and the master leasing and the rapid rehousing is because we absolutely have to find faster, more efficient, less expensive ways to house people. And we are open to any idea to do it. If the county will do the services, we're eager to build it. Flyaway Homes is sort of an offshoot in some ways of the People Concerned, OPCC, in Santa Monica. And they're doing long-term permanent housing in basically converted shipping containers. And they're actually doubling people up, so it's not an individual person per unit. And that's a new innovation that's coming on. It's an answer to the question of how we're doing it that we keep trying to reframe and readdress.
Thank you. Next question.
Hi, I would like to specifically address the question somebody asked earlier tonight regarding the amount of choices that homeless individuals have compared to the average individual. And I'd like to point out that that comment is inherently privileged and misguided. I would like to remind everyone here tonight that housing is a human right. I will say it again. Housing is a human right, and I implore everybody in this auditorium, when you go home tonight, to your houses, to your apartments, to your condos.
Please ask your question. Please ask a question. Okay, thank you then. Next question.
Immediately next door to the post office, to the Grandview post office. In the 18 years that I've lived there, I've never seen anything like this. My question is for sanitation. I woke up this morning, and I've woke up many mornings, and I've got human shit sitting right outside my door. I've called 311 before, asked them to come clean it up, okay, and they say, I'm sorry, it's on private property, we will not clean it up. That's not fair. I feel that you guys should clean it up. What can you do to help me clean up? And I've got fresh shit on my property right now. What can you do to help me? I didn't put it there.
Thank you.
These homeless people did.
Thank you. What can you do? What can you do for this lady?
Thank you for the question. Our environmental compliance inspectors do have a 24-hour response for any type of human waste on the public right-of-way. Now, we do have to check jurisdictional boundaries. We do not have the right to be on private property. But we will work with partners, and we will determine who is the property owner to ensure that a rapid response is warranted for something like this. I'll follow up on this particular location that you referenced today, but we do have a 1-800 number that all of you can call for any type of human waste on the public right-of-way, in which we will respond within 24 hours.
What's the number? How can they get the number?
Right, and I'll provide it to everybody following this town hall here.
It will be provided after the meeting and by some form of social media, website. Okay, thank you. And panelists, again, feel free to jump in to answer any of these questions, okay? Next question. Section 2.
Section 2. Please.
We're just trying to keep things organized, that's all. Thank you very much. Thank you. Please.
I'm Robert Watkins from Mar Vista. Thanks. I think everybody here basically agrees that somebody who's from a neighborhood, has contributed to the neighborhood, is born there, lived there, at least functioned in that neighborhood, who's fallen on hard times, lost their job, mental health issue, drug addiction from that neighborhood, deserves some help. And we will contribute money and build some supportive type of housing for people from that neighborhood who've fallen on hard times. But for at least the people who are voluntarily choosing to be on the street, which you can do today, voluntarily choosing to do heroin and meth on the street.
Please ask your question.
And a third of the people from out of state.
Please ask your question.
I think the solution is a
Okay.
massive.
This forum is for questions. Thank you very much, sir. This forum is for questions. Sir, please sit down. Thank you. Next question. Next question. Sir, please.
Aloha.
Thank you.
Aloha. I'm Kalani Whittington. Mike, thank you for holding this town hall. I think if you have more of them, it would lessen the level of anxiety we all have with the issues we're facing. I had a brain injury over 10 years ago. I am someone who is looking for affordable housing. I am on the brink, on a fixed income. But because I planned well in my professional career, I have managed to live without being homeless. But I am looking for affordable housing. I had a friend years ago who was a mistress to someone who was politically connected. I ran...
Please ask your question, ma'am, please.
I ran into someone who received affordable housing because she knew someone at HCID. My question is...
Please ask your question quickly.
Do I have to quid pro quo to get an affordable housing unit?
Thank you.
So you don't need to quid pro quo. We do need to have more resources. I can have HCID and my office talk to you after the meeting to see about the particulars of your situation, but I can't give an answer here on the fly without knowing the particulars. But folks from HCID in my office can help you, and maybe the county as well, and see what resources are available.
Thank you. Thank you very much. Next question, please.
Hello, I'm Alan Parsons. I hear a lot of talk about affordable housing and what affordable housing is. I want to know what you guys define affordable housing as. I want to know what the contribution someone is expected to make who has no interest in holding a job or finding a job. I want to know what the contribution is expected of someone who is a drug addict, who's disinterested in finding work and getting clean. What will their cost be for housing?
Thank you.
Affordable housing is defined as housing that costs no more than 30% of somebody's income. So
what if it's zero?
What a Section 8 voucher is provided, the tenant in a Section 8 unit pays 30% of their income, whatever it is, and the voucher pays the rest. There's in affordable housing, there's different ways of financing it, but when in a subsidized unit, which permanent supportive housing is the subsidized unit, the subsidy covers the difference between 30% of a person's income, that may be whatever they can earn at a job, or Social Security income if they are disabled, whatever sort of income they have, 30% of that and the cost to operate the unit. The difference between 30% of that and the cost to operate the unit is the amount of the subsidy.
I'd appreciate you if you answered the question. If the income is zero, what is their expected contribution towards housing?
0.
Okay, thank you.
Thank you. Next question.
Before we ask the next question, can I just respond to here I am bending over again, the person who was asking about how to find affordable housing in LA. I have a website if you guys are ready to write it down. housing.lacity.org. You been there?
Talk to her afterwards.
Okay, all right, let's have a chat.
Okay.
Thank you.
Thank you very much.
Can I
question?
also,
Question?
Can I add to? I'm sorry.
Oh,
Can
I'm sorry. Go ahead.
That's okay. No, I just wanted to add to the question about what's expected of people who are living in affordable housing. What's expected of them is what's in their lease. Their lease is a legal binding contract, just like everyone else in here. If you're a renter, you have a lease, and that lease is your legal binding contract. What happens inside of your apartment, as long as you're following the rules and the law, that's your prerogative. So I just wanted to clarify that people who live in affordable housing have a legally binding lease, which means that they have to follow the rules of tenancy.
Next question.
Hi, I would love to hear a bit, especially for the service providers, about how you all are specifically working to meet the needs of our Black and Latinx neighbors, specifically in cases of gentrification-caused homelessness. Thanks.
What's being done for that population?
I mean, one of the ways that we're working towards meeting the specific needs of our people of color that are way overrepresented in the homeless community is by hiring people that look like them. That understand the needs of the folks that are experiencing homelessness of color, and having people on our boards that understand the needs of people of color. It's very, very important to many of the organizations that are providing services in SPA 5.
Next question.
Hi, thank you. This is directly a follow-up to the gentleman who answered the woman's question who lives near the Mar Vista Farmers Market, because I'm a building owner, landlord, and business owner on that same block, and I cannot get a single sanitation anyone to come and help us clean up all the feces and all the pee and all the needles and all of the everything. We have reported incidents over and over again. Like, I want to say hundreds of times, and never once has anyone from your department come to help us. How can you help us?
Right. So part of the CARE launch that we just launched over a month ago in October, we were provided additional resources. So part of this CARE program is to have more dedicated resources in regions like Council District 11, where we have a dedicated care team.
I haven't seen a single person. I haven't seen a single care. I haven't seen anyone. And I've called multiple times the 800 number.
Okay, are you calling the MyLA?
I'm calling everyone who will pick up the phone. And you know what? There's a lot of finger pointing, too. Like,
Right.
sanitation says, oh, well, that's hazmat. And then hazmat says, no, that's sanitation. So I end up leaving reports everywhere I go.
Right, and another avenue is the Unified Homelessness Response Center, which is another avenue that you can make a call and a care team will be dispatched. Brian?
Can she give you her number so that you can help her?
Sure.
Thank you.
Absolutely.
Next question.
Hi, Mike Bonin. You're saying that you hate the encampments and you want nothing more than to get rid of them, but you're saying that the only way you'll move on that is to build $500,000 condos or something like that. Why not find city-owned lots, put the mobile showers there, put up a barbecue, put up some solar arrays and some shelter, and move the encampments to a more decent living scenario where the people can find their dignity, and then the homeowners and residents don't have to live amongst this. I mean, what is undoable about that? If there's a fire in Malibu, within 24 hours, there's tents and places for people to go immediately. Why don't you do that?
That is exactly what the Mayor's Bridge Housing Program is. No. It's what... yes, it
Now,
is.
wait a minute. He has to answer the question.
And if anybody in this room, you or anybody else, has a suggestion for other locations for bridge housing, the mayor's office and I are happy to look at them.
We have to do the next question. Okay, keep it shorter though, please. Please.
Bridge housing. I'm talking about an immediate evacuation of these encampments into a city-controlled lot that doesn't cost $16 million. I'm talking about starting it like you would a national disaster, an emergency evacuation. That kind of an approach. Okay. Why don't you do that?
So, as I explained earlier, the city does the capital infrastructure. I'm trying to answer your question, and I'm trying to give you a direct and honest answer. The city's funding sources are primarily for capital expenditures. We can build stuff. The services mainly come from the county. So we are building the things that the county has agreed to help us fund. We are trying to do as much bridge housing as we can. We're actually building more than the county has committed to fund yet. We'll do more. But if you want to know if that kind of service is something that we would be able to provide, it's a question of the service. So with due respect, I'm going to ask Phil from the county to answer that.
Well, now we have to... No, please let Phil answer the question as best as he can, because that's why we're here tonight. We're here to have a civil conversation and to listen to one another. So, Phil, please try to answer this man's question.
Thank you. So first, by way of context, in Los Angeles County since January of 2018, about 3,000 shelter and other forms of interim housing beds, additional beds, have opened for individuals, and over 300 units for families. A step down from that is safe parking, which is a secure location with a hygiene facility for people who are living in their vehicles. And you may be surprised to know that there are more people living in vehicles in Los Angeles County than there are living in tents and encampments. They are not as visible as people in tents and encampments, but there are more of them. And the county and the city have both funded LASA to support more than doubling of the number of safe parking sites that are so that in the course of this fiscal year, there will be more than twice as many safe parking sites as there were at the beginning of the fiscal year, but the number will still be small relative to the total number of people living in vehicles. The next step down from safe parking, which is what you specifically asked about, but I wanted to provide context, is called safe sleeping or sanctioned encampments, where there's security and hygiene and people can sleep outdoors. That is not something that has been implemented in Los Angeles County. It has been experimented with in other communities. It has generally not been very successful in the sense that there have been many problems on the sites, and people have typically not been successful in moving out of them into either shelter or housing. That said, we as Los Angeles County are open to experimenting with the possibility of a safe sleep site. And for people who are interested in seeing probably the best example in the United States of safe sleep, I would recommend a look at Haven for Hope in San Antonio, Texas, a site that has been visited by numerous Los Angeles County leaders and that we have considered. The primary challenge to even experimenting with a safe sleep site is the site, a location that is large enough and close enough to a concentration of people experiencing unsheltered homelessness to function effectively. But it is among the many, many experimental and innovative efforts underway in Los Angeles County to combat homelessness. Safe sleep is a possibility.
It's a no-brainer. It gets them off.
Okay,
So-
we only have 10 minutes left, so we want to get to others' questions. So please.
Just to add a coda on that, I want to thank Phil for the answer. So if there is, I think I've demonstrated, there is not a potential solution to homelessness that I am not willing to try. So I'm entirely open to that proposal. If you have a suggested location, let's get together with your county supervisor, whether it's Mark Ridley Thomas or Sheila Kuehl, and have the discussion.
All right. Next question, please. We have 10 more minutes.
I'm going to try to do the best I can. Okay, I've been on both sides, so I have knowledge about the issues that you guys are challenged with. However, I also work as a housing navigator, case manager, and our population is the substance abuse, mental health, and homeless, chronically homeless.
Question?
What we've been faced, and I'm trying to see how we could work together with all the entities that you all have, and we have a pretty broad, different facets, how you guys can work more together, because our challenge is like we send some to treatment, but it's not enough time. They don't get jobs. It's not enough time. They only give them
So
30 to
just
60.
your question, please.
How can you work together that once you start doing the temporary Band-Aids, how you can work together where they don't go back into the
So it's
population,
finding a
where
permanent
sobriety,
solution.
where there's
We got it.
sobriety and all these other things are sabotaged.
Thank you.
I think I can handle this one. My name is Nick Holt. I'm from Department of Mental Health. I'm on the home team, Homeless Outreach Mobile Engagement Team. I think actually in our service area, which runs Malibu to LAX to Culver City to Beverly Hills, we do an exceptional job of coordinating with our regional providers to try to reduce duplication of services, to try to brainstorm, consult on really challenging and difficult cases. In talking with the panelists, I didn't meet one single person who's okay with what's going on right now. I think we're all struggling, and we're, to have one answer or one way it's not going to happen. So everybody needs to be in. I think we are in this service area. We're trying to do everything we can. St. Joseph's E6 does a wonderful job. We have a lot of support with them, a lot of support with PATH, all these different providers, and we're trying to do everything we can to encourage different with the people on the streets. The way that things are with the laws, we are limited as far as what we can do by the state, and that is where we are. So we're throwing everything we can at encouraging different with people out there on the streets every single day.
Next question. Next question, please. Next question.
I want to say thank you to all of you for coming tonight. I know this was a tough audience. My question is really two parts, and it's something that really amazes me that I haven't heard one of you talk about this, is no one has brought up the fact that in 2014, our state passed 3 very bad laws. Proposition 47, 57, and AB 109. No one discusses this. I don't understand why you as advocates, my question for you is, why aren't you trying to do something to come up with a better law that can replace those 3 horrific laws? It doesn't take a rocket science to determine that, listen, our homelessness problem became clearly explosive when those 3 laws came into play. And my second part is, none of you are advocating for an amendment to Landerman-Petter's Short Act, which allows the state to maybe do something really worthwhile for the mentally ill and actually take them and make it easy for conservatorships to be applied to mentally ill by their family members. Right now, you can't even, it's very, very difficult to get a conservatorship.
Your final question.
My
Bottom
two
line
questions-
question.
My 2 questions are, why isn't there something done about those 3 terrible laws and something about amending Landerman-Petter's? Because otherwise, you can build all the housing in the world.
Thank you. Anybody want to tackle that?
So real quickly, I actually did address it in my opening presentation when I talked about the broken promises of criminal justice reform. I mentioned 47 and 57 and how voters approved these initiatives, voters approved them, and that the commitments the state was supposed to make for additional opportunities and services were not met. We want those services to be provided. We want that half of the voter intention to be fulfilled. In the meantime, Mayor Garcetti has created an Office of Reentry, which is actually hiring people. We have created an LA Rise program in Los Angeles where we are trying to give job opportunities to people who have been recently released from prison or people who have been homeless. So we are trying to do everything we can here while still encouraging the state to fulfill its commitment. As to the other proposals, the city, as I said earlier, is not really involved in healthcare and mental health. That's more of a county matter. But the city is constantly pushing the state, with some success, to give us more money for homelessness, and pushing the federal government constantly to help us in a variety of ways address the homelessness crisis. As I mentioned earlier, the federal government has abandoned the vets, so the city and the county are building the bridge housing for the vets. The city, we're using Triple H dollars, city-approved dollars, to build the permanent supportive housing for the vets on the VA campus. We are trying all the time to impact the other levels of government and then backfill when we can. We're paying for domestic violence shelter beds because the federal government cut them. What would be immensely helpful is anytime there is energy, whether it's in a neighborhood council or in a social media forum that is insisting on these changes, to contact not just the mayor or the council office, but to contact your state legislator or to contact your federal representative, the ones empowered to make the change. We need help getting the pressure on them to do what we all agree they need to do.
See you nodding down there.
I don't know if Maria wants to
here.
answer on the LPS.
Okay. Yes. So the other part of the question was about the law, Lanterman Petrus in short, also known as the LPS law, and that is the law that allows law enforcement and other designated people, including people at the Department of Mental Health, to hospitalize someone involuntarily. So, for instance, if someone is a danger to themselves, a danger to others, or gravely disabled, which is defined as someone who is unable to take care of their food, shelter, and clothing due to their mental illness, that we're able to hospitalize them. So I know there's a lot of concern about people that you see on the streets who seem like they really are gravely disabled, they're unable to take care of themselves, they seem like they have a mental illness, maybe they are talking to themselves, etc., and people are concerned about them. So actually last year the county did work with our department to introduce legislation to expand the definition of LPS and grave disability specifically, to have kind of a broader authority to hospitalize people, again, who seem like they really need help and they're not reaching out to get that help. It did not go through it did not pass the legislation. I think we're still working on that to try to address this very important issue.
Next question.
Hi, my name is Jeremy Burdick. I live in Venice. So according to the LA Homeless Services Authority, the homeless count increased 33% in Venice last year, while going down 2% across the rest of District 11. How do you explain that? And how would that concentration distribution be different if all the services in Venice, like St. John's, SPY, Bread and Roses, the health clinics, homeless housing projects including a 154-bed shelter, the 100-unit Thatcher Yard project, the 70 PSH unit Reeves Davidson project, and the 35 PSH unit Rose Apartments were not all located or planned in Venice?
I got the beginning of the question about...
Okay, so basically, homelessness went up 33% in Venice last year. It went down 2% everywhere else in District 11 on average. How do you explain that?
I don't have an explanation for that. I mean, the homelessness stats have gone up and down in a variety of ways for a couple of years. There was 2 years ago where the numbers went down dramatically in Council District 11, largely because of a great program that St. Joe's and PATH and the airport put together to deal with encampments near Manchester Square, which has sort of become the model that we're now using for bridge housing. The count often is, in my mind, reflective of how intense the volunteer opportunities are. I don't know if there's anything you want to say about that.
Yeah, I think I also just wanted to add, so the point-in-time count does look at what our population is across LA County, but it's really, really important to remember for all of us that it's one single night in January, and we take that and we try to extrapolate it and, create what it looks like across our region, but it's a snapshot of that moment in time. So while that might have been the case on that night in January, it's hard to know if those are real changes that we're seeing. The other piece I would add is we also know that places that we're bringing services through the Bridge Home program and other places are places that are seeing people actually get permanently housed because now they have a place to go to get the services they need to exit into permanent housing. So but for those services, those people wouldn't have any other options. So we do know that those services work too.
And Bridge Housing in Venice hopefully will open around the new year or shortly after, which will help us bring down the homelessness population in Venice. Mm-hmm. If it hadn't been delayed through litigation, we would have had some of those people off the streets already.
Thank you. We only have about 6 more minutes. Next question.
Hi, I'm Tammy. I've been living in Mar Vista for almost 25 years, and thank you very much for being here and for our services. I'm just a female who's walking through Mar Vista often, and the other day I literally had about this much room to walk past the post office. I mean, these guys were looking me up and down, and I was like, I don't scare easy. I was scared that day, okay? And this is in the middle of the day, like noon. I mean, they were looking at me like I was crazy, just walking by their little head. So what I'm saying is, how am I going to feel safe as a female walking through my own town of 25 years? Seriously, I am a female. I walk often. The question is, how can I be safe? Okay, that's my fucking question. I'm sorry. And it's getting really bad. Very bad. I'm sorry, and I'm feeling very unsafe.
Please answer the question.
So I'm just feeling, how can I be being safe? And I'm talking about not just by the post office, I'm talking about the slot
Please, he's going to answer your question, ma'am. Please.
So just, pardon me. So just so I have the fact pattern right. So this is not an issue of lack of the ability to passage. This is you don't feel safe with the encampment there.
Well, the way they were looking at me, I was feeling pretty unsafe.
Okay.
Okay, I mean, they were chucking me out and looking at me, and I had about this much room to walk by them. I didn't have a sidewalk. They took up the majority of the sidewalk. I literally had a path to walk through. So I don't feel like that's acceptable in my hometown, right next to the post office, to have no sidewalk to walk on.
The law allows us to regulate out to 36 inches of passable space in the public thoroughfare.
Please allow him to answer the question.
The other part of that is I am unfamiliar with the patrol, how the patrols work out in that particular area about the library. This is not the first time, I'm sorry, the post office. This is not the first time I've heard about the post office. I will have that discussion with the captains of Pacific Division and determine what that patrol schedule is in that area. If there are any particular times where the concentration, and I know as soon as I say this, everyone's going to say all the time, but if there's a particular concentration of times when the behavior is particularly bad, where it's towards the criminality of it, then please communicate that to the senior lead officer of the area so that they can request the additional resources to interdict at those times.
We only have a few more minutes, so we'd like to get to the next question.
I'd love to talk to you after this is over.
Next question.
My name is Stacy. I feel like you're characterizing this in the wrong way. I feel like these are refugees. This is a product of our politicians and the decisions that you've made. And I feel like it's only fair to do much, much, much more because
Your question?
So I am asking you to reconsider the kind of resources that you use to attack the problem. That it should not be legal or is certainly not safe to live on the street for anyone. And so why is this not a FEMA problem? Why is this not a catastrophe? Why is no one seeing this as an emergency? Why aren't all the resources...
Thank you. This is our last question. Who wants to tackle it? Okay, we'll do one more.
I think let me start. The premise I agree with the premise of your question, that we're dealing largely with refugees. As a result of a really screwed up system in this country, which has way too much income inequality, way too many mental health problems, a failed healthcare system, neglect for our veterans, redlining and racism. And
This is specific to Los Angeles.
Our system, the inevitable result of the system in this country right now is homelessness. It is the inevitable result of our economic policies, of our housing policies, of our banking policies, and our healthcare policies. So it is an emergency. And we have tried to bring on more and more resources to treat it as an emergency. A few years ago, the city was spending only $20 million. We now have $400 and some million that we are spending, plus aid from the state. We have things we have tried to do that we have tried to do on an emergency basis, like bridge housing, has been sued in many cases. The state has now provided us legislative relief to move that faster because the state believes that it's an emergency. We have the emergency is twofold, right? I mean, the emergency is your house is flooding. You can put down all the towels that you want to try to mop it up, but until you fix the hole in the roof, your house is going to continue to get wet when it rains. And we have holes in our roof, and we need to be responding to the encampment crisis we have on the streets, but sure as hell, we need to fix the system that is throwing homeless people on our streets that all of us are trying to deal with every day.
If you have a short question, yours will be the very short question. Your last question, sir. Thank you.
Hi, my name is Dan, and I'm a privileged white man who lives on the west side.
Please allow this man to ask this question.
So what I'm curious about is how do I, as a privileged white man who lives on the west side, combat the NIMBYism and ignorance of this room to help the service providers do their job better? So this is for the service providers, not the legal people.
Sure.
I would like to respond to that. So there are millions of ways for all of you to get involved. And be part of the solution. There are hundreds of volunteer opportunities at all of the agencies all over the west side and all over the county. And they're really valid ways to get involved. Volunteer, mentor, open a spare room in your home to be a host, just like the Rapkins who are sat down there on the left-hand side. If you're a landlord, rent to folks that were formerly homeless. Hire folks that were formerly homeless, get involved, be part of the solution. It's absolutely possible. I'm a member of the community. I live in Mar Vista. I have 18 years in Mar Vista, and I stepped up and wanted to be part of the solution. I've invited hundreds of volunteers to be part of that too, and you're all welcome to step up and do that too. There are millions of ways to get involved.
And with that, we're going to have to end the program. No, we have to end the program. I'm sorry. I like the parameters at the beginning of the evening. 45-minute session is up. If you still have questions, you can submit them via the councilman's website. And I also have your written questions, which will be answered. I'm so sorry we have to wrap up the evening. Thank you very much, everyone. Thank you for coming.